I'm Evan LeRoy, and this is New School Barbecue. LeRoy and Lewis Barbecue is a little blue food truck off South Congress in Austin, Texas that cooks locally sourced barbecue on homemade pits. We try our best to honor where barbecue comes from while respectfully adding our own modern touches. These are our recipes, methods, travels, and stories. This is New School Barbecue.
What's up, barbecue fans? Evan LeRoy here. In this video, Bradley and myself are making pork hash and rice. This video was originally published May 19th of 2020. So 2 weeks ago we posted our hog break video, last week we posted our cook and pull a half hog video, and this week we're using everything else that we didn't use in the pull half hog, and we're making our most beloved side dish, pork hash and rice. This is traditionally a Southern barbecue side dish, typically found in Carolinas, southeastern United States barbecue traditions, where they mostly cook whole hogs. You don't see it a lot in Texas because you don't see a lot of whole hogs in Texas. But as soon as we started to spend some time around guys that cooked whole hogs at festivals and in the barbecue community, we started to eat pork hash and rice and just fell in love with the dish. And it also made sense from a financial perspective that if we're cooking half hogs, whole hogs, we're gonna have all these bones, we're gonna have all this extra hash meat, we're gonna have stuff that we can use to make it. Since we added hash and rice to our menu, it has become the best selling side dish next to the kale Caesar slaw. The main difference between our current process and what is shown in this video is when and how intensely we pick the hash bones. So in the video, Bradley's going to cook the stock down and then pick some of the meat. What we do now is we take a lot more time to pick the bones before they go into the stock, so we don't have to sort through and pick them afterwards. You can hear Brad remark about how difficult it is to pick through the pig feet because they have so many bones in them. Well, that was one of the things that really turned us from picking after the stock cook to picking before the stock cook. You'll be able to see in the early part of the video that there's still some meat attached to the bones and like the rib membrane and stuff. All that stuff now comes off before the bones go into the stock, and then after we cook the stock, the bones just go into the trash and we don't really pick them afterward. This video was published during the first spring of the pandemic, so we were really watching our spending. Trying to save as much money as possible, so we were trying to get every single gram of pork off of those bones that we could. Now we cook more than just one half hog per week, so we have plenty of extra hash meat before we take those bones into the stock. And we don't want to spend all of our money on labor of just our guys picking bones all day long. Additionally, we bring the hash together a little bit different now. You'll see in the video, Brad will cook the pork scraps down with the stock. What we do now is we bring the stock to a boil, then we turn off the heat and add the meat, add the rice, add all the flavorings, and just kind of let that steep for about 30 minutes before we blend it. The reason we switched is because for a while we were cooking the hash meat, the rice, and the stock together, and it would burn on the bottom of the pot. So now we just kind of bring the stock up, we put all the stuff in, we let it steep, and then we puree it. And then that's when we can really play with the texture. If it's too thin, we can add more rice, we can add some crispy pork skins to thicken it up. If it's too thick, we can add a little bit of water to thin it out, and then we can really dial in the acidity. Sometimes if it needs a little bit more tang, we can add some cider vinegar. If it needs more salt, we can obviously add more salt. And that's basically our pork hash and rice. See you next week, barbecue fans.
This piece, this is what you'll often see on the back of a rack of spare ribs. I'm gonna leave it on just because it's gonna crisp up nicely, and that's part of what goes into our hash. So all these bones and dried out pieces like the membrane here, I don't want that in the pork itself, so that's all going to be set aside. And any piece that's a little too crunchy, like right there where it was in direct contact with the flame, we'll save that and we'll add it to the pork hash and rice.
We've been eating a lot of pork hash from a few different places, from Elliot Moss, from Brian Furman, and we had started to get in, we started to be able to get in these whole hogs. We started cooking whole hogs, and so as a part of that process, we wanted to cook the hash. So inspiration from other people, and also using what we have around us.
All right, so you've seen us break down the hog, you've seen us cook the hog, you've seen us make pulled pork sandwiches, you've seen us do everything we got, but now it's time to deal with all the things that we've got left over. And to do that, we're gonna make pork hash and rice, which is one of my favorite dishes we have here at LeRoy and Lewis. If you haven't heard of pork hash before, basically what it is a really rich, thick pork gravy that is typically served over white rice. We don't see it much in Texas because, quite frankly, you don't see whole hog much in Texas, and that's really what makes the pork hash special, is using all the bits that don't make it into whole hog. So.
Okay, here we have a bunch of stock bones. This is everything pulled from the hog. So we've got rib bones, we've got pieces of the backbone, we've actually got some shoulder bones from last week. I actually started this stock with shoulder bones from last week, and I put in all of the stuff that we pulled from the hog this morning. So this is going to be a nice, really rich stock. I'm just going to fill it up to about the rivets here. I'm also going to put in these things. These are just the extra bones that we smoked off. And then this is our hash meat. So I picked through all the bones that came off, and this is everything that's not a bone. So all the like hard, crunchy pieces of meat like that, those are not going to go into our whole hog. Those are going to go into our pork hash. So it's going to be all this stuff, the stock, once it's cooked and strained, mixed with all this stuff and blended, and then it's going to be awesome.
All right, it is the next day. This stock has reduced a whole bunch. As you can see by the walls here, it's leaving some residue, but I think it's time to strain all these bones out and see what this stock looks like. Oh, Jesus. All right, let's get those bones out. All right, so I got a perforated pan inside of this hotel pan here, and that's just to get all these bones out of this pot and do a real rough strain. Also allow everything to drip while I pick through all the bones. Now it's time to just go through these and throw away all the bones. These have given us all they can give. You can see they're really brittle because they've been boiling away for so long. But into the trash they go. And all we'll be left with is all this meat from the stock and from the shanks and whatnot that will save and go into hash meat. So the entire animal, this is the only thing that really goes in the trash. Just dry bones that have already had all the nutrients pulled out of them for the stock here. It smells very good. Kind of nice that there wasn't any feet on the pig this week, because there's so many tiny little bones on the hooves that are really hard to pick through. Same with the tail. But if we got them, we'll throw them in. This is starting to fill up, so now I'm going to send it through this here straining setup. I got a little mesh one inside of this big one. I use the big one because it's got the hook. What we're left with is a beautiful, super cloudy, really gelatinous, smoky pork stock. All right, so after sifting through all of this stock, what we're left with is nothing but meat. All the meat that was stuck to the bones. I know it's kind of a pain in the ass to always be saving your bones, but it's so worth it, especially if you just, every time you cook a rack of ribs, just throw your chine bone or anything you got, just stick it in the freezer. And eventually you'll have enough to make a beautiful batch of smoky pork stock. Same goes for cooked meat as well. Always keep the bones. I mean, you're paying for the bones just as much as you are the meat weight-wise, so you might as well use them and get something delicious out of them. And this is something you can't pick up in stores. This is a super thick gelatinous stock. So we got all this meat, put that aside, and this is what we're left with. Super cloudy, super dark. You can see the fat already starting to separate, and once this cools down, it turns into a big block of jello. It's super gelatinous and very firm. And all this fat separates and forms up on the top, and we can just pull that right off, and you're left with a perfect, super cloudy, smoky pork stock. Start out this pork hash, what we're gonna do is take this pork stock here. First, let's put on some gloves. Nice. And as you can see, all the fat has solidified right on top here. And this is a solid stock. So I'm gonna peel all this fat out. Just peels right off. So first things first is to put all this nice pork stock into the pot. The stock is so thick. Bam. All right. Stock is in the pot. Is that why they call it a stock pot? Next up, we're gonna add all this pork back in that we pulled out of the stock. Even though it's already softened up, it goes back in. And this is all those crunchy bits that we pulled off from the whole hog while we were pulling it in the truck the other day. Like these pieces that are real hard. So these are going back in. All right, so the meat is in the stock. Time to throw it on the heat. All right, now we're just gonna cook this down until all that meat is nice and tender. And check it out. Here's next week's stock boiling away. Mix it up. All right, so this here pork hash has been cooking down for a good hour or so. You can see the levels gone down a bit, and all the pork in here is nice and tender, and everybody's kind of gotten to know each other, so to speak. So now what we're gonna do is take this here immersion blender, and we're gonna stick it right in and chop up all the pork so it gets to a nice uniform consistency. This is what turns it from a broth into a gravy. Whoa, that looks weird. All right, let's get back to normal. All right, now that this thing is boiling along, we're gonna add a little more texture in the form of cooked white rice. And this is some already cooked rice that we didn't sell last week for pork hash and rice. So it's just cooked dry rice. Really can't use it for much, but it goes perfectly back into pork hash and rice. That's gonna add some more texture as well as help thicken up this here hash. All right, now that the stock is reduced, the meat is nice and tender, it's time to add a little bit more flavor to this hash. So we're gonna start out with a nice fat pinch of salt, as well as a couple of cups of some nice yellow mustard, add a little tang, a little zip, as well as a couple of cups of some Frank's Red Hot for a little more tang and a little more kick. And now we're just gonna blend this up till it all looks good. And that's it, that's our pork hash and rice. That's all that goes into it. Well, I say all that goes into it, but this took like a week to make technically, but you can see right here, it's got a real nice texture to it. It's got a lot of meat in it, a lot of rice to help give it that nice chunky texture. But yeah, let's plate one up.
Howdy guys, we're going to make some pork hash here. Bradley has showed you all of the steps through it. I made a little bit of stock in the very beginning, and here I am right at the end again. This is just some long grain white rice. We've just done basically a volumetric 1-to-1. We cook it with a little bay leaf here right on the truck. It's one of the only things we actually cook on the truck is the rice. We're just going to scoop a couple scoops. Nice little mounds like that makes for a good little presente. Here we've got our pork hash, our nice little lined third pan. Makes the dishes easier. Some of my favorite toppings here we've done before. We've done a loaded pork hash with like a soft runny egg and some other cool stuff and Fritos and stuff on there. Normally we just go little scallions on here. We're going to go a little bit crazy today and go for some crispy skins. And you can request this at the truck. Little crispy skins on your pork hash. And finally, little scallions. From here you can go hot sauce, Crystal, Louisiana Red Dot. You can go barbecue sauce, anything you want on here. But, I mean, that's pretty much it for me.